Hi there, this is Christina Jones from the Teaching and Learning Center at El Centro College. In this video, we're going to explore what it means for color and contrast to be accessible and why that's important. I'm also going to show you easy, practical steps you can take to communicate more effectively with your entire audience. To start off, let's explore the importance of accessible color and contrast by taking a look at a deliberately awful example. Ready? Let's go. I did warn you it was awful. But the important question is, why is it awful? What specific elements make this slide so difficult to read? Whenever I show this example during a live workshop, people immediately point out that the contrast between the green text and the red background, combined with the background pattern, make this slide almost impossible for anyone to read. When we take those things away, it's still no masterpiece, but it's definitely communicating the idea a lot better now. So, now that we've dialed down the awfulness of this example, let's talk about the accessibility best practices that it so blatantly violated. First, as we just experienced, backgrounds can make pages difficult to read because the text is competing with the image behind it. Backgrounds can also just be painful to look at over long periods of time, especially depending on the colors and patterns involved. I admit, I gave you a pretty extreme example for dramatic impact, but in general, it's still best to either avoid backgrounds entirely or to only use very subtle patterns. Another big issue in that awful example was contrast, which is the difference between two colors. Here's an example of great contrast: black text on a white background. Black on white or white on black is the highest possible contrast you can use, and it will make your content as easy as possible for everyone to read. As the contrast between the text and the background decreases, though, the words get harder and harder to read. By the second line in this slide, you might be straining a bit due to the lighter text on the white background. By the third line, you probably feel like you're failing some sort of diabolical test at the optometrist. Contrast is really important to pay attention to because it affects such a broad range of people. People with low vision or color blindness need high contrast to understand your content. But that same high contrast that some people need will also help your message stand out to everyone. And that's especially true as people age and their color vision naturally declines in sensitivity. Speaking of colors being less noticeable, did you know that 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women are colorblind? To illustrate how that might impact us as content creators, here's a picture showing a green, a yellow, and a red apple as they appear to someone who is not colorblind. And below it is a picture of how those same apples would appear to someone who is red-green colorblind, which is the most common form of colorblindness. In the colorblind example, you'd be hard-pressed to pick out which apple was which if they weren't labeled, right? That's something to keep in mind if you use color to convey meaning, like marking important items in red, because for a reader who has red-green colorblindness, that color coding won't get your message across the way you intend. Color blindness also isn't just an issue with red and green, as these three images demonstrate. The image on the left is how someone with no color blindness would see this picture. The image in the middle shows red-green color blindness, and the image on the right shows blue-yellow color blindness. But making your materials accessible doesn't mean you need to specifically avoid red, green, blue, yellow, or any other color. It just means that you need to avoid using color as the only way of conveying your meaning. This is especially true because screen readers either can't read color or won't do so unless the user has enabled that feature. If you've never encountered a screen reader before, it's a type of text-to-speech software that reads all of the text and text-based elements of digital content out loud. I'm going to play you a short example so that you can get a sense of that experience.
Screen reader example. This is an example of the JAWS screen reader. A screen reader is an assistive technology that takes text like the document you see on your screen and reads it aloud as you can hear in this example. Learn more. Visit link https://webaim.org/techniques/screenreader/number how to learn more about how screen readers read content.
You may have noticed that the screen reader read the words on the screen, but it didn't announce visual formatting choices, like text color, bold, and highlighting. So if you're using the look of your text to convey some meaning that the actual words don't, then a person using a screen reader will miss out on that part of the information. Who uses screen readers, though? Screen readers are essential for people who are blind and people who are visually impaired, but they can also be useful for people with certain types of learning disabilities. For example, this simulator shows one of the many ways that text might appear to a person with dyslexia. In this example, the letters seem to shift and jump around the page, turning just a few paragraphs into a frustrating and time-consuming read. In comparison, a tool that reads the same text out loud can really transform someone's reading and learning experience. So, to help all these audiences, we want to make sure that we design our content in a way that allows everyone to get the same meaning, whether they're viewing the content on the page or hearing it read out loud. To help you get your meaning across, here are a few quick tips for emphasizing text in an accessible way. First, if you're going to use colored text, make sure it has a high contrast with the background. So, with red text on a white page, go darker than the usual bright default red. And apply another kind of formatting, like bold, to catch the eye of people who can see the text but won't perceive that particular difference in color. But wait, you say, a screen reader isn't going to be able to read that red or that bold. Absolutely right. So, what we can do is add a textual signal to match the visual signal, like actually writing the word important before the thing that you want your readers to pay attention to. That strategy can also let you apply color to just one word rather than to an entire sentence, which can make your documents feel less busy. It also really makes your important catch the eye for people who are processing your content visually. And if you really want to be eye-catching, remember that the highest contrast is between black and white. When you want to go beyond just black and white, you can use a free color contrast checker to quickly find out if your foreground and background color have enough contrast to be accessible. On this slide, I've provided two examples, one that you can download to your computer and one that you can use from a web browser. The WebAIM Color Contrast Checker can be more convenient since you can quickly access it from any internet browser. But if you're on a Windows computer and don't know what hex codes are or how to find them for particular colors, I would recommend downloading the Color Contrast Analyzer instead. It works on both Windows and Mac, and you just need to click any two colors to check their contrast ratio. Let's take a look. To access the download for the Color Contrast Analyzer, you can use the link I provided on the previous slide, or you can run an internet search for Color Contrast Analyzer. In that case, you're looking for the result from the Paciello group. Here's the resource page for the Color Contrast Analyzer, which is where you should end up after clicking the link in your search results. The download button is located at the lower right. Click the download button. You'll be taken to the page for the latest release of the tool on GitHub. On the latest release page, scroll down until you see the list of downloads. They'll be listed at the bottom of the page under the heading Assets. If you're on a Windows computer, click the CCA-setup file that ends in .exe. If you're on a Mac, you need to install the file that ends in extension .dmg. After you download and run the installation file, you'll be able to open up the Color Contrast Analyzer on your computer. The icon is a white A over a blue square. To run a contrast check, make sure you have the item you want to check visible on your computer screen. Then, open up the Color Contrast Analyzer and click the eyedropper tool in the foreground color area. Make sure you only click it once. Then, to identify the foreground color you want to check, click a spot on your computer screen that's displaying that color. For example, click a piece of colored text. You'll see that the analyzer automatically identifies the color and inputs it for you. Repeat the process with the eyedropper tool in background color to select the background color of your text or image. Once you've selected two colors, the contrast check results will display as pass or fail at the bottom of the checker. Notice that the checker results mention AA and AAA levels. That refers to how well something meets Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. A is the lowest level, AA is the middle level, and AAA is the highest level. At DCCCD, our goal is to get our content to meet the middle level or higher, So your contrast checker results will need to get a pass for at least level AA. Another helpful thing this tool can do is show you how the colors you've chosen will look to people with different forms of color blindness. After you've run your color contrast check, go to View in the menu of the Color Contrast Analyzer and select Color Blindness Simulation. Here's what that looks like using the red and green from our horrible example earlier. Even without the distracting background taken into account, we can easily tell from these simulations that those colors would be very difficult for people with some forms of color blindness to read. Now that you know the technical tricks, let's recap the big ideas about color and contrast. First, you definitely are allowed to use color in your materials. However, color should never be the only way that your meaning is conveyed, because then a lot of people can miss out on that meaning. For example, marking deadlines in red won't help people who are blind, people who are colorblind, people who use screen readers, and even just people who can only print hard copies in black and white. Also, the contrast between the colors you use must be accessible, because when the contrast isn't high enough, the information can be difficult for a large portion of your audience to process. But that's one of the great benefits of accessibility best practices for color and contrast. They're essential for some people, but following them is going to improve your materials for everyone. To learn more tips for creating accessible materials, visit DCCCD's full accessibility checklist at dcccd.edu/accessibilitychecklist. The checklist includes color and contrast, but it also covers 9 other best practices that will help make your materials accessible to people with disabilities and more effective for everyone. You can also access the links to resources that I've mentioned, like the Color Contrast Analyzer, by viewing this PowerPoint online. Just use the short link dcccd.edu/A11Y-15 to access this presentation. It will also give you access to all the others in the 15-minute accessibility video series. Thanks so much for watching.